What's up, guys? Welcome back to Katson's Corner. Today is episode 5, talking about everything that's been going on in college football with a focus on the draft for the Chargers. As we all know, the Chargers are back to 2-2 now, so perhaps less in panic mode in terms of consuming draft content in October, but still going to be here every week, breaking down some prospects and stuff, getting you guys familiar with some of the top names in the 2024 class so that when April rolls around, you are not surprised by who the Chargers end up taking, hopefully. Um, Remember, if you like the video and everything, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Catch all the episodes that are coming out every single day with me, Alex Insdorf, Arjun, Steven, Tyler, everyone. You guys know the deal. If you like me in particular, for whatever reason, you can find my stuff on Twitter, of course. It's just at Alex Katson, the same way that my name is spelled on the screen there. I do stuff for Chargers Wire also. With the bye week coming up, I'll probably be doing a lot of film breakdowns, kind of going through how the first 4 weeks of the season have been going. I'm really excited to do all that stuff for you guys as well, so make sure you check that out as well. We're going to get straight into the action this week. Chargers visited 3 more games this weekend on Saturday. We had Penn State Northwestern, which is the Chargers' third visit to a Penn State game this season, which is a new high. I think that last week I had said that they had been to Notre Dame 3 times. I was wrong. That was only the second time they'd been to Notre Dame, but this is the third time they've been to Penn State, or at least a Penn State game. They haven't been to State College all 3 times. But third time at Penn State, that is the leader so far. They were there in week 1. They were there in week 3. Now they're there in week 5. Might as well circle that week 7 game that they have coming up as well. Chargers were also at UAB Tulane, a big Southern matchup, and then Maryland, Indiana for some Big Ten conference play as well. So we're going to do it kind of the same way we've been doing the last couple weeks. Talk about one major guy from each of these schools that they visited, and then go through some games happening next Saturday to talk about some guys to keep an eye on. We're going to start with Penn State. Last time we talked about Penn State, we talked about their corner, Kalen King. We're going to stick on the defense because Nicholas Singleton is not eligible. Drew Aller is not eligible. So I can't talk about the running back. I can't talk about the quarterback. Wouldn't talk about the quarterback anyway because we have Justin Herbert, of course. But going to stick on the defense. We're going to talk about edge rusher Chop Robinson. First of all, great name. Immediately move him up like a full round just off the name. Wonderful name. He transferred in from Maryland. He spent his freshman year at Maryland in 2021. Transferred to Penn State for the 2022 season. Had a really great 2022 season, and now is back for 2023 as a true junior. And he has gotten off to a fast start again this year. You see on the slide there, it says he's a top 10 athlete in college football. How do I know that? He is the number 9 ranked athlete on the Bruce Feldman's Freaks list that comes out every summer. He's been clocked as fast as 4.47 in the 40. That's at 250 pounds. Fast guy. Also has a max bench of 400. Has a faster shuttle time than Micah Parsons. Feldman, in his Freaks list article, didn't go so far as to compare Robinson to Micah Parsons, but he did invoke the name a couple times, of like, this is a similar looking guy. What stands out on tape about Robinson is that he's super explosive. He's a very bendy rusher, someone that's going to beat you around the corner every single time if your tackle is not oversetting, if your tackle is not kick sliding out there, if they're not Jawan Taylor bending the rules a little bit to get all the way to the outside and cut that outside lane off. He's also a super high motor rusher, works through the whistle, always chaining moves together, trying to make sure he gets to the quarterback no matter what's going on around him. I do want to see him develop a little bit more of an inside counter, especially as opposing offensive tackles get wise to the fact that he's going to try to run the arc against them on every play. That's going to open up a lane for him to cut that back inside and, punish tackles for oversetting and that sort of thing, punish tackles for getting out there and doing the Jawan Taylor gambit, all that stuff. So I want to see him kind of develop a plan to get back into the inside, take advantage of that lane between the tackle and the guard and get to the quarterback that way. Haven't seen him quite do that yet so far this season. He's also got some room to improve as a run defender. I don't think he's a super great run defender at this stage. He is so laser focused on getting the quarterback most of the time that sometimes he'll overrun his gap. He'll get too excited, get too far upfield because the tackle lets him by or something, and then he's giving up his gap and allowing a big run play. Not a super great contained player at this stage, but he's young. Penn State deploys him as kind of a designated pass rusher, just kind of asks him to get after the quarterback on every play. So part of that could be coaching as well, obviously. But something I want, just something to keep an eye on, something that's going to factor into his evaluation. It's going to be a little bit more of a projection for him. I have him kind of in like that like late first to early second territory right now. A couple of you guys have asked me about the edge class on Twitter and on the Guilty as Charged Discord and all that stuff. I do agree that it's a bit of a weaker edge class, especially compared to last season. I don't really think that there's a guy that's like a lock for a top 10 pick. We talked about Jared Verse last week from Florida State. I think that he's probably the closest thing to it. Either him or Dallas Turner from Alabama are probably the two closest guys to being like a locked in top 10 pick. And then I think after that, you get pretty quickly into a tier of guys that includes Robinson, along with some other players, JT Tuimoloau at Ohio State, a couple other guys in there that are kind of in that like late first to early second territory. So if the Chargers season keeps on track and we get back to where we think the Chargers can be playing football, I think Robinson will be someone that is in the vicinity and is at least like semi-realistic. Of course, we say that every year about players like Bijan Robinson, and then they end up going top 10. So who really knows? But that's my opinion as of right now, is I think he should be kind of in that range where the Chargers are picking. Moving on to Northwestern, who is not a very good football team this year. There's been a lot of stuff going on with that program this season that kind of goes beyond the field. It's been, a difficult season for them. They were already not going to be super great even before the whole thing with Pat Fitzgerald happened. And so it's just been tough sledding for them. Best guy I could find on their team is Xander Mueller here, the linebacker. 6'2", 235, built pretty much like every Northwestern linebacker that's come in to the NFL in the last decade. You think about like Patty Fisher, guys like that. There's one more, I can't remember his name right now. But just pretty much the exact same player as those guys. He is on the Shrine and the Senior Bowl watch lists. So he's someone that they're, the all-star directors are keeping an eye on. He had 87 tackles last year. He's got a nose for the ball, forced 4 turnovers last season, 2 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, made some really big plays in key moments for this Northwestern team last year. Super great run defender. He's an excellent run defender. I think that he's someone that you are plugging in at probably Mike and just having him plug the run over and over again if he gets run in the NFL, and that's what he's going to do. But he's not a coverage player. He's just not. He's never going to be. He's just not the athlete for it. And so that's going to limit his value in the modern NFL. If it was 2005 or 1995 or 1985, I think that he'd be a much more coveted player. But in 2023, it's a little bit hard to get on the field if you can't cover as a linebacker these days. And so I think he's going to be more of like a UDFA type, going to have to try to make a name on special teams. Not sure that he's like the kind of athlete that can make that work on special teams. And so you kind of have him as just like a practice squad guy, have him hang around and stuff. Last year against Penn State, he was excellent. He had the best game of his career, 14 tackles. I believe he had a forced fumble in that game. This year, not so much, only 5 tackles. Penn State was only ahead by a couple points going into the fourth quarter of this game, but ended up running away with it, taking it 41-13. So not the greatest game from the Northwestern side there, and not the greatest game from Mueller, but if you had to pick a guy that the Chargers were in attendance to watch from Northwestern, I think that it would probably be him. Moving on to UAB Tulane. UAB's got a running back, Jermaine Brown, who I like a bit, but is a really strange player. I'm not really sure how he's going to fit in the NFL. He's recruited as a wide receiver originally. He's a 2-star recruit in the 2019 class as a wide receiver. Goes to UAB. He moves to running back. Came in at 5'8", 170 as a college freshman. He's up to 5'8", 195 now. So he's put on like 25 pounds of pure muscle basically to move to running back. And you'd you'd think, right, as a former wide receiver, it's like, oh, well, they use him as kind of like a scat back, right? And they throw the ball to him a ton, and he, does a lot of like outside runs and all that sort of stuff. Nope, not at all. He's a between the tackles guy, doesn't really have elite speed. He's not good on outside runs. He's very much like an inside zone type running back. Really more of like a bruiser, like get tough yards sort of guy, which is weird because he's not very big. Um, he is, I think, decent in pass protection. I wouldn't go so far as to say that he's good. There's a couple times where it seems like he's more interested in just like hitting someone than actually like maintaining a block, which kind of pairs well with his physical running style. Kind of makes sense in that respect. And so, not 100% sure where he's going to fit in the NFL. He's kind of too small to be that kind of bruising running back type in the NFL, probably, but also like doesn't really have the athleticism to be a receiving back sort of archetype, even though he has a wide receiver background. I think that that probably means that he doesn't end up being an NFL player, but it's someone that probably gets a training camp shot, hangs out on the preseason roster, on the offseason roster, and does some stuff there. UAB is in the middle of a rebuild right now, and so things are a little bit tough. It's hard to find players that are draftable for that program right now, but Jermaine Brown is the closest thing to it. They've also got another running back, Demetrius Battle, who's pretty decent, a transfer from West Alabama. Tulane, we're going to talk about the quarterback, Michael Pratt. Obviously, the Chargers don't need a quarterback, but I really like Michael Pratt, and I wanted to talk about him, so I'm going to talk about him. Pratt is, I think, underrated in this quarterback class because there are so many good quarterbacks in this class. I don't think that he's going to end up being a top 5, maybe even a top 7 quarterback in this class, which is crazy because he's good. I think that he's someone that teams are really going to covet for his leadership, for his kind of just like poise, all the stereotypical quarterback stuff. He kind of fits all the Bill Parcells metrics for quarterbacks, if you guys are familiar with those. He's a 4-year starter, started as a true freshman at Tulane in 2020, was their starter each of the last 2 seasons as well, and obviously now coming into 2023 as their starter. Had plenty of offers to transfer out somewhere, take some NIL money, and go start at a big program, and decided he was going to stay at Tulane, which I credit him for. You see the C on his chest there from the bowl game last year. He's been a team captain for multiple years. He has been injured this season. I don't remember exactly the specifics of what the injury was, but he has been kind of in and out of the lineup this season. Did play in this UAB game. A better runner than you'd think. He's not like a great runner. Like, I'm not saying he's Lamar Jackson or anything, but he is a pretty decent read option threat. Kind of similar to Justin Herbert in that respect of like, you have to respect the fact that he might tuck the ball and run, but you're not going to like game plan around it necessarily. He's also a very quick decision maker. Gets through his reads pretty bang bang, and he's got a quick throwing motion, and so when he decides that he's going to throw it somewhere, it gets there quickly. Part of the reason for that is also because the Tulane offense is not very complicated. Pretty it's an offense that's pretty predicated on bootlegs and half field reads and kind of shortening the field for Pratt and for the offense. And so there's a lot of rollouts to the right where all of a sudden all of the routes are kind of right in front of you. And so it's a lot easier to scan the field. There's a lot of read option. There's a lot of RPOs. There's a lot, all that sort of stuff that we see in modern offenses now, that kind of makes it easier on the quarterback. There's not a whole lot of, sitting in the pocket and scanning the full field. And so that's going to be a concern for him, I think, entering the draft. It's a concern for most college quarterbacks entering the draft these days. So I wouldn't be like too like keyed in on it, but it is something that I'm going to keep an eye on. I think is going to be a question mark for people. He also doesn't have the greatest arm in the world. It's not a terrible arm either. I think that it's NFL caliber, but I think it's probably on the lower end of NFL caliber. He doesn't throw deep a ton, but when he does, you can kind of see like he needs to put a lot into it. Doesn't have the greatest mechanics. I think he's generating a lot of that arm strength just with his upper body. I think if he cleaned up his lower half a little bit, he might be able to get a little bit more drive on those balls. And so that's something you're looking for in the NFL as well, as kind of cleaning up, marrying that upper half and that lower half to get a little bit more hip torque into that throw. If you've ever seen the Dak Prescott drill, that's like what that's for, is trying to like force yourself to get hip torque into the drop back, so that you're generating power with your entire body instead of just your arm. And so I think that's something he's going to need to work on as well in the NFL. I have him kind of on the fringe of day 2, day 3. I know a few people are higher on him than I am, in that respect. But if you're looking at like end of the third, fourth, maybe even like fifth round quarterback, I think it's someone the Chargers like could sneakily consider, maybe, if they, if he's seen in league circles as just kind of like a career backup that can win you games if like all hell breaks loose. um, Easton Stick is a free agent after the season. They've already cut and put Max Duggan on the practice squad. Like, there's really no like clear option at backup quarterback behind Justin Herbert. I think that it's something that they could address. This is something that we talked about last year too. They ended up taking Duggan in the 7th round, and then like that hasn't really worked out so far, it seems like. So I think, once you start talking about day 3 guys, you're kind of in that territory where it's like this guy could be in consideration, which is partly why I put him on here, but partly also, like I said, I just wanted to talk about him. I think he's the best player on Tulane's team, and so I just thought it would be the most interesting guy to talk about. Moving on to Maryland, Indiana, we're going to talk about a running back. Maryland has a really, really good one. Roman Hemby had almost 1,300 yards from scrimmage as a redshirt freshman. That was 3rd in the country among freshmen, both true and redshirt. I hate how the FBS does that, but it's one of the necessary evils of the sport. There's nothing I can do about it. Came into Maryland in 2021, played his allotted 4 games in 2021 before taking a red shirt, and then 2022 really took a step forward. Kind of broke into a running back 1 role there. Has maintained that this season, although there is a couple other guys that get carries for the Terrapins there. So he's in a little bit of a committee. Um, he's got he's the speed back in that offense. He's got 4.4 speed. I think his vision is really good, honestly. The way that he uses his speed to open up holes that are not available for people of regular athleticism is really impressive to me. He's also a very involved and productive receiver. Maryland throws him a decent amount of screens. He had, I think, 33 receptions last season, is already up to 12 this year. Not like Austin Eckler numbers, not like Christian McCaffrey numbers or anything, but like for a college offense, that's a pretty good chunk of the receiving offense, for a running back, especially one that's not playing every single down. I do have some questions about how he's going to protect against the pass. He's a little bit smaller just because he's a faster guy. I think he's just barely scratching 200 pounds. There are some times where he's a very eager cut blocker. Which isn't a bad thing always, but it does kind of result in muddier pockets, for your quarterback if you're cut blocking all the time, because the guy is kind of like vaulting over you and it's causing a whole lot of noise in front of the quarterback's eyes. Would prefer that he just kind of like hangs in there and anchors against a guy. But also, like, barely 200 pounds is a speed bag type guy. He's probably not going to do that as much. And then also, I think just something to monitor. He did have a really good start to the season. In Maryland's non-conference slate. His last 2 games against Big Ten competition, I believe it was Michigan State and then Indiana this week, has not really produced as much. Has only gotten like 10, 12 carries and has been held under, I think, 50 yards in both of those games. So just something to keep an eye on there. Kind of emblematic of Maryland's whole team. Maryland always does this where they start the season like 5-0 and they're ranked 19th in the country or something, and then they play a real team in the Big Ten and they lose by 30 points, and it's like, oh right, Maryland's going to go 7-5 again. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on. He's only a redshirt sophomore, so there's no guarantee he comes out this year. But also, it's running back where those guys tend to get out into the draft as soon as they can. So someone I'm still keeping an eye on for this year, someone I think could be a good fit for the Chargers, is kind of like adding more speed to the offense. Indiana, we're going to talk about wide receiver Cam Camper, who is their best player on offense. Transferred in from Trinity Valley Community College in Texas after 2 years there. Started to get noticed by some smaller programs. New Mexico offered, and kind of like schools in that tier, and then that interest kind of slowly trickled all the way up to the Big Ten. Ends up committed to Indiana. Was Indiana's best player on offense last season, was their leading receiver in 2022. Tears his ACL at the end of October, beginning of November last year, misses the rest of the season, comes back this year, still looks like a great player. He comes back looking better than ever. He's a very fast, sudden route runner. Like he's got the speed to threaten you upfield, but he's also got the agility in short area to stem routes off and really like leave corners completely tied up and like doing uh, like he looks like Houdini out there. Like the corner never has any idea where he went. He's got glowing locker room reviews. The coaching staff has called him a gym rat. The players call him Coach Cam. Like there's all sorts of stuff. Like just like great reviews from him, from his teammates, from his coaches, and everything about like his work ethic and everything. He was limited by an injury against Maryland. Didn't have a catch in this game. Missed the entire second half. It's not clear. He did get injured in a game earlier this year against Indiana State, which was a knee injury to the knee that he had the torn ACL in last year. It's not really super clear if the injury against Maryland that was limiting him is that same knee injury or if it was a different injury. Everywhere that I could find it listed, it was listed as an undisclosed thing. So if it was a different injury, you have a concern of like that's three different injuries in less than a year, two of them to the same knee. If it's the same injury, you have a concern about like, well, he tore his ACL and then he hurt that knee pretty immediately again. Like, what does that look like? And so there is going to be some medical concern with him there. And also, I'm going to be keeping an eye on him just because I'm curious to see how he handles some of the upcoming adversity Indiana's got on tap. Indiana fired their offensive coordinator immediately after this game ended, which is pretty early to fire your offensive coordinator. Usually not a good sign when you're firing your offensive coordinator after 5 games. And so how that system changes and how he adjusts and how the rest of Indiana's offense adjusts is going to be something I'm keeping an eye on in terms of his NFL projection as well. Looking ahead to next week, we've got a couple good matchups on tap. Obviously, Red River Showdown is this week. I'm super excited about that one. I'm going to be watching the trenches in that one. Oklahoma's got a center, Andrew, I think it's Rame, who got like 6th-round feedback this spring, summer. Center is a position that I think the Chargers are going to be looking at a little bit more heavily. I've been advocating for them to take a backup type guy behind Corey Linsley to kind of groom until he retires for a year or two now. Obviously, with Lindsey's heart condition, you hope everything is okay with him and that he's going to be able to continue playing if he so chooses. But I think that it kind of accelerates the urgency of like, hey, we should probably find the center of the future somewhere. Rame's a good place to start. Going to be kind of a later round guy, but he has a matchup against 2 NFL caliber defensive tackles for Texas this week. Tavondre Sweat is a guy I really like and kind of like the day 2 range. Alfred Collins, more of a day 3 guy. That's going to be a big matchup in the trenches. I think it's going to decide a lot of the game for Oklahoma on offense, especially because Dylan Gabriel is not super great under pressure. UTSA Temple is a big American Conference matchup. UTSA in their first year in the American. They've got 2 NFL caliber receivers. DeCorian Clark, who was on the Freaks list, had some offers to transfer out, decided to stay at UTSA. Joshua Cephas is another guy I really like. Both those guys are going to be NFL players. DeCorian Clark, I think, is a day 2 pick. Cephas probably day 3. UTSA also has a safety, Rashad Wisdom, who was a big-time hype guy on Twitter last year, someone that everyone really liked on Twitter. Ended up getting injured last year, missed the rest of the season, came back for his super senior year this year. Hasn't looked quite the same quite yet. Someone I'm still keeping an eye on is more of like a value pick, really, of just like, can you get him back to where he was in 2022 type thing. And then Temple's got a linebacker that no one is talking about, even though he got 3rd-round feedback in the spring from the NFL. And that's Jordan McGee. I have not seen anyone say anything about him. I don't think that many people watch Temple football games, which is fair. But like I said, got like 3rd, 4th-round feedback from the NFL this spring. So someone to keep an eye on there, especially against such a good UTSA offense. Alabama's got Texas A&M this week. I don't think that's necessarily going to be a great game, but also Alabama hasn't looked super up to par this year. Texas A&M is going to be down their starting quarterback Connor Weigman, who's out for the rest of the season with a foot injury. So it's going to be Max Johnson. Alabama's got a corner. Well, they've got two corners, Kool-Aid McKinstry, who we've talked about on the show before briefly, but Terrion Arnold, who's either a redshirt sophomore or a true junior, like his first year being draft eligible this year. He's had a great start to the season. He's someone that a lot of the big-time draft people have pointed to as like one of the big risers of this year's class. Jordan Reed has talked about him a ton. Nate Tyson, Dave Brugler have talked about him. Like he's on his way up. Still Alabama's number two corner because of McKinstry, which means that I think that he's going to draw the matchup against Aeneas Smith, who's kind of a running back wide receiver hybrid type for the Aggies. Is playing a lot more traditional wide receiver these days. Kind of started out as a running back and has now shifted to wide receiver a little bit more. And then on the other side, you'll have Kool-Aid McKinstry up against Evan Stewart, who is not draft eligible. Stewart is a true sophomore, although he's very, very good as well. So I'm curious to see how that draft eligible versus draft eligible guy matchup is going to go on the other side of the field. Might not end up mattering because Texas A&M's playing a backup quarterback, but we'll see. Max Johnson is competent enough, but also it's Alabama, so I don't know. And then Kentucky versus Georgia. I think this game is going to be a lot better than people probably think going into it. Kentucky's got a phenomenal running back, Ray Davis. He's a Vanderbilt transfer, has had a fantastic start to the season. Just had a really huge game against Florida. I think he's going to do the same thing against Georgia. Obviously, Georgia's defense has always been like the calling card of this team, but if you've watched any of Georgia's games this season, their run defense hasn't been the same as it's been in previous years. They haven't really like replaced that linebacking core that's all in the NFL now with like guys of the same caliber. They haven't really replaced the defensive line with guys of that same caliber. The guys on their defensive line we're going to talk about in a second here, they're still NFL caliber players, but they're not like Jalen Carter. They're not Jordan Davis. And so like the run defense has struggled a little bit for Georgia. And so I think that this could be a really big game for Davis, for Kentucky. And I think that if he has two big games in a row against Florida and against Georgia, then like it's time to start talking about him a little bit more, NFL wise. He's an older guy, and so there's a limit. There's going to be a limit to how far, how high he can get in the draft. But still, someone I'm keeping an eye on. And then Georgia's defensive tackles, Nazir Stackhouse, Zion Legue. Like I said, not on the same level as Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, but still very, very good players. Stackhouse is, I think, a day two guy. Legue probably closer to day three. Still great Georgia defensive lineman. I mean, it's no surprise it's Georgia. But like I said, a little bit weaker than it has been in years past. So intrigued to see how that one goes. That's going to do it for this week, guys. Hope you enjoyed as always. We're up to almost 100 guys that we've covered on the show in 5 episodes. I know we're really speeding through some of them, but as the season gets deeper in and we have more film to go off of and stuff, we'll start talking about guys more in depth and everything, and kind of keying in on some guys that I think are really, really good Chargers fits as I kind of like start to do my final evaluations, which is going to be at like the end of the month here. I'll start doing those. So super excited for what the rest of the season looks like. Super excited for this weekend of college football, as always. Like I said at the top, if you guys like me in particular, you can find me on Twitter at Alex Katson. I'll be doing stuff for Chargers Wire all this week. All my draft stuff is on there if you want more of that content as well. Make sure you subscribe to the show, hit the bell, get the notifications, do all the stuff. You guys know the deal. And yeah, we will see you next week for another episode of Katson's Corner. I don't know what the schedule is going to look like yet because the Chargers are on Monday Night Football next week, but we will get that figured out and get it out to you guys. And I will see you then. Bolt up.